In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can go about creating a droplet on DigitalOcean and install Ubuntu onto it. It's very simple, and in future lessons we're going to go over how you can actually do something with that Ubuntu install. So once you create your DigitalOcean account and set up your billing, because everything on here is going to be charged per how often you use it, how often your virtual machines are running, and set that up. You're going to be able to come over here and say create a droplet. So you click on create droplet, and it's going to give you a bunch of different options. The first thing is that you have to enter a host name, so I'm just going to call this Ubuntu server. Next you choose a size, and they're going to tell you right up front what you get and what the cost is going to be. So for something like this, 1 gigabyte, one CPU with 30 gigabyte and 30 gigabytes of storage space and 2 terabytes of transfer. That's pretty good for a web server. And at $10 a month, that's actually about $7-ish, roughly, cheaper than what you might pay for Amazon, depending on your different usages and stuff. But for this one, I'm just going to choose the lower powered 512 megabytes of RAM with 1 CPU and 20 gigabyte SSD with 1 terabyte of transfer. This is actually for even for a regular web server. If you're going to have a moderate amount of traffic, this isn't too bad. We're probably never going to use that much storage space, even with an operating system on top of it. So you choose that, or you can choose whatever you want, and then you choose the region you want it to run in. I'm going to choose New York 2, because right now you can't choose New York 1 or Amsterdam; they're too full. And then you choose the image you want to put on here. So in this case, we have a couple of different ones you can put on: Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Arch Linux, and Fedora. You can also go in here and choose by applications. So we have LAMP on Ubuntu 12.04, Mean, Ruby on Rails, Redmine, so on and so forth. You also have your images. So if you've already created, let's say you have a server that's going to be running a certain web app, once it's up and running, you can make an image of that. That way, if you have to deploy another server with that on there for load balancing purposes, you just deploy your image. You don't have to deploy a blank image and then reinstall all your software on there. You can deploy from any backups you've made, and in this case, if you have any destroyed, I made a test earlier and I destroyed it, so they could pretty much recreate ones that you've deleted. So in this case, we're going to go to applications. We're going to choose LAMP on Ubuntu 12.04. If we had just chosen this one over here, we could still install the Apache, MySQL, and PHP. This just eliminates a step for us, and it's pretty nice. So I'm going to choose LAMP. I'm going to leave their virtual I/O on. I'm not going to put on private networking, and I'm not going to enable backups right now. And it tells us your root password will be emailed to you. So whatever you put in under your billing over here, or your regular user account, it's going to be emailed there. So I'm going to go ahead and say create this droplet, and it tells me I have approximately 60 seconds remaining. So what's different about this than, let's say, an Amazon Web Service machine, once this is done being created, again, it's going to email us a root password. We're going to be able to connect to it, which is really nice, unlike Amazon where you have to use SSH keys in order to verify getting in. It's more secure, and you can do this on DigitalOcean, just they don't enable that out of the box, and it's more difficult if you're on the road and you need to access your servers to be able to do that. This one seems to be a little more open, as far as, like, once I have my root password, I can connect through any SSH client anywhere in the world, even from my cell phone, without having to do anything special. So we'll just wait for this to finish. Approximately 3 seconds remaining. So this is doing all the background work of cloning their standard image and getting it all fired up. And there we are, we're done. So now a couple of nice things that happen here. First off, it gives us our public IP address. Again, when you're dealing with like an Amazon setup, you'll have an internal virtual address that can change, and you have to specifically request, I think it costs probably a couple cents a month, a public-facing IP address that will always be your IP address. Here, they just give it to you. It lets us know that this is active, how much RAM it has, how much hard drive space, where it's located, and what it's running. We can power cycle or power off the machine. And again, these machines are charged based on how long they're running. It kind of doesn't matter what you're doing on them, again, as long as you don't go over that 1 terabyte of transfer per month. But if you say, hey, I only want this to be on while I am developing, you can shut it off. And that way you're not being charged while it's off, and you just have to come back on and turn it back on, just like a regular computer. My virtual machines, I pretty much leave them running 24/7 because it doesn't cost that much more. Again, if they're quoting you $10 a month for normal usage, that's not too bad compared to just having a regular web host, and having one website on there can cost you anywhere between $15 and $20 a month. So this is giving you an entire server for cheaper. So we click power off. It tells us we'll shut this off versus a power cycle. Power cycling is just like turning it off then turning it on again. Maybe if something gets hard, like frozen on your server, and you say I gotta shut it off. And then we have our droplet history. This tells us all the events that occur, which is very nice that we can see everything that's going on here. Click on access. It's going to tell us, okay, we have console access, and we can reset the root password. Notice that this droplet history follows us around. We'll look back at this in 1 second. We can resize. This will allocate upgraded RAM and cores for your virtual server without making any disk size changes. 1 minute downtime. Please power off your server from the command line. So we can't do that just yet. Snapshots, again, we could take a snapshot and restore from snapshots. We have different settings here. This tells us, again, our IP address. We can enable private networking. We can change our kernel in here. So, I mean, here's all the different kernels that we could upgrade to if we wanted to. Recovery and renaming, pretty simple. We have graphs that tell us different usages over different time, but since we don't have anything done yet, there's nothing to do there. And we have destroy, and you can tell this kills your server. So here you can say we destroy, and it says we want to scrub data. This will strictly rate zeros to your prior partition to ensure all data is completely erased, and it takes a certain amount of time. I'm not sure, but I would imagine that this size here will increase based on the hard drive size. But not what you have on the drive, because it's going to write zeros over 20 gigs, regardless of if we're using it or not. This will rebuild your droplet using original image you specify when deployed. So if we wanted to rebuild, and here you go, here's stuff. We don't have to worry about that right now. So let's just see. If I were to power this off, it tells me that my event is processing. Boom, there it is. So now, when I go to resize, aha, you can see here it's going to give us the ability to change. And again, this is not talking about hard drive space. This is just giving us the ability to upgrade our CPU and our RAM. Simply that. We go back to snapshots. You can do snapshots here now. Certain settings we can enable. So, lots of interesting stuff that we can do here. So, let's go back and let's boot this. Now at this point in time, I have received my my root password, so we'll be able to log in. And while we're waiting for that, we can come over here really quick and see some of the other parts of this. We have no snapshots, we have no droplet backups, we have my recently destroyed. It tells me that I have a temporary snapshot will be automatically deleted within 48 hours. I guess this is if I change my mind and oops, I didn't mean to delete that. SSH keys, this is if you wanted to add this extra layer of security in. So instead of having to have a username and password when you want to SSH onto the machine, you would just have a key file, and so when you'd pop up it would say, okay, who are you logging in as, and you'd say root, and it would read that key file and automatically log you in then. But we don't have to do this. We can get into something like this a little bit later because it gets a little complicated. Billing is just billing. Support, if you have any open tickets, you can create a ticket up here. Fun stuff. DNS, this is where we're going to come later if we want to add in a host name. So right now we're going to be able to access our server via this IP address. However, we're definitely going to want to add in a domain name later to be able to point to this. And the API here, this is if you, later on we can look at this. An API is an application programmer interface. Let's say you wanted to run a hosting system and you wanted to write a tool that was going to let you create these droplets very quickly. instead of logging in, you could have your own website where you say, hey, deploy a new droplet based on this image with these statistics, this amount of RAM, this amount of hard drive space. You could do that through an application programmer interface, or assuming. We'd have to look at their documentation, but we can look at that later. So by this point, my server is back online. So I'll click here, and I'm going to click on console access. So it has to establish the console access. And again, for Ubuntu, we're going to log in as root. Each Linux distribution has something a little bit different. Usually it'll probably be root. Sometimes they make you make a new username. So this opens up, and here we go. We can see parts of this. I'm going to say overwrite that. Looks like my install wasn't quite done. Just going to kind of go through all these. Okay, boop, there we go. So now I'm going to log in as root, and I have my password. And I'm in. So it tells me here, welcome to DigitalOcean's beta LAMP stack. Please be sure to change your root MySQL password. Current MySQL password is password. You can change MySQL password with the following command. So since they said to do that, that's what I'm going to do right now. MySQL admin -u root. Oh, you can see this. This console access is not very fun. -p password. Right now, I'll just make it test and test. Well, we'll probably come back to this one later. Actually, what we could do here is we could issue the command MySQL admin password and then say we want to do this as user root and specify -p. That should prompt us for the password. And now I can enter a new one. So now I'll actually enter a secure one. There, now my new MySQL password is in there. So this is really slow, and I'm not a fan of this. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to type exit. That gets us back to our login screen. I'm going to copy this IP address. I'm actually going to open up a program called Putty, P-U-T-T-Y, which can be found here. It's at chiarc.greenn.org.uk. Now make sure if you're going to install this on your computer that you're legally allowed to. As you can see here, there are some countries where it says that the encryption that is used is outlawed. So just make sure you're not going to get yourself in trouble. And we want to download putty.exe. All these other ones, there's definitely uses for them, but just downloading putty.exe and just throw that into wherever you run your programs from, and you can open it up directly. And in here, I'm just going to paste in. I should have been able to paste in, but guess not. My public IP address here. There we go. We're going to leave it as SSH port 22. Click open. It's going to say, hey, the server's host key is not cached. We say yes, and I can log in as root. And again, I'll put in my password. And now I'm back. This is going to be a lot faster. I think we can ignore this message up here since I already changed that. But that's the basics of getting one of these servers started. In our next lesson, we'll look at how we can go ahead and start configuring Apache, PHP, and MySQL to actually do stuff. You can just use it right out of the box with Ubuntu, but we're going to make some changes to make this a little more flexible, including making a different area on the hard drive to store all of our configurations and our websites. That way, if something were ever to happen, we'd be able to move this stuff. It wouldn't be kind of scattered around the drive like it is now. We'd have everything in one central spot with some Apache changes and some MySQL changes that we'll be able to carry with us. So if we ever did have to launch another server, we'd only have to change a couple of files and not potentially hundreds of config files, depending on how many websites we're running on a server. And again, that'll be in lesson number 2.